Right about now, you might be thinking that this guitar is put back together, but you couldn't be more wrong. No, the neck is still loose, and I have it in this jig for some evaluation, just to see how much I need to take off the heel, or at least get an idea how much to take off. So the way to change the neck angle is you need to remove material from the base part of this heel. But how much? That's the question. So considering the action at the 12th fret is sitting roughly around 80 thousandths on the bass side, 70 thousandths on the treble. Now don't forget that height of the saddle is only about 20 or 30 thousandths right now. That wants to come up to about 3/32 of an inch. So the difference there divided by 2, considering the deflection in the top, multiply the difference between the length of the heel divided by 2, added to the action height, distance between the nut and the 12th fret. I know this sounds very complicated and there is a formula to determine all this, but to keep it simple, generally, if you remove around 30 thousandths of an inch, that's a good starting point. So hey, let's get started. I'm just going to mark it off with some tape and get started removing material. Before I start doing any sanding, I just want to undercut a pocket in the heel so I'm not sanding a ton of material off, just the outer rim. I like to just use a sanding block with some 80 grit paper and just keep sanding, working my way close to that tape line. When I get close, I'll do a quick measurement and see where I'm at, and then go from there. This is where the process takes a lot of time. It's a lot of back and forth between sanding, checking the neck angle, see if I have the right amount of clearance over the bridge, back to sanding, checking, sanding, checking, sanding, checking, so forth. Don't you hate it when that happens? Once I get close, I'm in the ballpark, then I'll start doing the sandpaper pulls. This contours the neck perfectly to the body. Just touching. I'm going to give it a little more clearance. I'm going to do a few more pulls. Before I do that though, let me check my center. In about 5/32, so it's got to come over this way just a little bit. I got to take a little bit more off this side of the heel. Yeah, I'm going to do 4 pulls here and then check it again. And if I'm centered, then I can do an even amount on both sides to get it perfect. I'll do 3. Let me check it at 3 here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back in the jig and check it with the strings on it, on the high E and the low E. And then I'll know exactly how far to go. There he is. There's the noisemaker. This is why I put music in my videos. That's 10 thousandths total difference, plus or minus 5 thousandths. That's perfectly acceptable, and it looks really good by eye. So what happens when you take material off the heel, it gets loose in the dovetail. So now I want to tighten that back up by adding some shims. Here I'm going to take a couple of pieces of mahogany, and ultimately I'm going to glue these in place. I just want to check to see that this is the right thickness and that these will work. And you see that little gap? That's what you want. Now I can sand it down until that gap goes away. Now I know I have a nice tight joint. Here's the surface I'm going to glue the shims to. Just want to make sure that they're nice and clean and flat, no old glue residue, so I get a good glue bond. What do you think? Want to see? Look. Have a look. You don't care. You just want to go inside and eat. Okay, monkey, let's go. Just before I walked away, I remembered to add a little bit of wax paper between the caul and that shim. While that's drying, I thought I'd take a little time and do some work on this binding that I left. It's a little bit proud, and so I just need to scrape it back and get it as flush as possible. Got this little piece of binding here to fill in this gap. What I did was I cut a little piece of black white, glued it to a little section, and then cut the section to fit in there. Now I just need to glue this in place. This little gap here, I'm not going to worry about that because that gets covered up by the heel. Let's see when I put the heel in there what that's going to look like. I should be able to fill that in just a little bit, maybe do a little bit of sanding and a little bit of touch-up work here so that's not as noticeable. Let me glue that in place first. I have this old binding, and I'm going to cut up a few little pieces and add a little acetone and make a little paste with it to fill in this gap. moving on back to this neck reset. Now that the shims are dry, let's go ahead and start sanding these and getting them fitting into that dovetail so I can glue this neck back to the body and wrapping up this neck reset. I'm going to go ahead and carve this, I'm going to get this to be nice and flush on this side. I'm going to keep all this meat here on the lower side, and then I'll check the fit. I use chalk in the dovetail so I can see where the interference is and I can remove that material. It's getting closer. Still a little gap. It's getting tighter though. Okay, now I got it together with a clamp, and if I can show this, I got it nice and flat now. Just got to put a little shim underneath this extension. Maybe, maybe not. Let me do this little bit of measuring on that. Just double checking, clearing the bridge by 32nd or so. I think I'm in a good range. I don't want to overset it, so I'm going to go with this. It's got a nice tight joint at the heel where it meets the body. So I think this is just about ready to glue back. If I can get it apart now. Okay, the guitar goes back in the jig, and just looking at I think I may want to do a shim here, because right now the way this is sitting, there is fall away. There's plenty of fall away, so I'm going to put a shim under there, and just double checking the fit and the center. What I did was I came on the outside edges. This is where they line up with the bridge. The exact center is right there, and you can see between the two, the G and the D string, we're pretty centered. So I'm not going to do any more sanding on this. I'm going to make a shim and go ahead and glue this in place. back in the jig it goes for the final glue up. Just did a little dry run to make sure everything's good. You don't have to flood this with glue. This joint is so tight. Just takes a nice even coverage. I'm gonna put some of this down in the pocket. So it's getting there. The neck is on. Gonna let that dry. Still have some binding issues. Still have this piece missing. There's a couple of splits. There's one there. There's one on the other side, I think, too. Right there's another one. Needs a pick guard. Needs a new saddle and a new nut. So that's gonna be next week. Join me, kids. We'll see you then. Take care. Subscribe if you haven't. I'm trying to get to 2,000. 2,000 subs would be nice. Help me get there. I'm a man who cares. Peace out.